Welcome to your source for research, innovation, news, insights, and commentary. This is Research Business Daily Report, and we're sponsored today and this week by 4i, the science of growth. 4i is inviting insights and analytics practitioners to a special webinar this coming Friday, that's August the 22nd, where you can all learn how to become a rock star in the field. More about that and the webinar when we wind up today's report. For over 35 years, Eileen Campbell has made an indelible personal and professional impression on the research industry, first at NFO, then when she moved on to the Angus Reid Group, and as she ascended the ranks of Millward Brown, where in mid-2013 she stepped down as Chief Executive Officer. Now, it didn't take long for a really smart business to hire Eileen, and she became the CMO at IMAX in the middle of last year. Eileen and I recently crossed paths at a conference, and we chatted about her different client-side responsibilities and her attitudes, which have evolved a little bit about the research industry. She's always going to present unique perspectives, and this was no exception. You went to IMAX about a year ago?
Almost exactly, yeah.
As the CMO. Is there a research team there?
You know, we've got one person that we're now having specialize in research, but when I joined the company, there was no research team at all.
Okay. But you went there with the understanding you were going to create one, obviously, to help you along.
Yeah. I'm not so sure I went with the idea that I would create a research team or department because we're small, but that I would create a research expertise within the marketing team.
Right, okay. Now, you talked this morning about what you're generally trying to do, but what are the handful of really primary things you want to do with research in the short term?
Well, I think in the shortest of terms, we just need a much deeper understanding of who our customer is. You know, we're an organization where there are a lot of assumptions, maybe almost myths in the organization about who the IMAX customer is, and we want to either validate or invalidate that and really understand who our consumer is. So we want to know who our most valuable customers are and who our most growable customers are.
So the company's really been growing by itself for all these years.
Yeah, now a lot of that has been via globalization. I mean, first they moved out of the institutional world into the entertainment world, and then they started to globalize. So in some ways we've been growing by basically extending the business model more than through deep insights of consumer motivation.
Okay, now living in Chicago, the only IMAX theater we have is down, I think, by Navy Pier.
Yeah.
So living up in the northern suburbs, we're not really going to venture down there too often. Is that typical of what it looks like in the U.S.?
Probably not quite. There are a few more in the greater Chicago area, and I'll send you a list of where they are. But essentially what we do is we have restricted territories, and they're based on the movie-going population. Mm-hmm. So in New York, that territory could be 2 or 3 city blocks. Right. And in, Toledo, Ohio, it could be all of Northwest Ohio.
What is the most interesting or surprising thing to you being on the other side of the table as a marketer who needs to acquire research as opposed to someone who's been obviously very adept in marketing and selling research over the years?
Gosh, what's been most surprising? A couple of things. One, just how many agencies there are out there. I mean, there's so much proliferation that I've told people I could go weeks and spend 40 hours a week talking just to agencies. So I have to be very discriminating about who we can give our time and attention to. The other thing, if I'm going to look at the more negative side, is how often I'm called by somebody who's really ill prepared. And it's a disappointment to me because I don't think it reflects well on the industry.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that strikes me, and I could be wrong about this, is one of the things I'm more interested in doing is what I call a market research toolbox. Mm-hmm. Because I think there are so many tools out there that are undefined as to when to use them. Mm-hmm. And from what you were saying this morning, you were kind of confirming that. Yeah,
I think there are lots of interesting ideas that intellectually I go, wow, I'd love to experiment with that. I'm just not in a big enough organization with a big enough budget to do a lot of experimentation. So I'm looking for validation stories and not just what the research will do, but how it's been applied to a business issue.
Have you seen anything at this show that has particularly struck your fancy?
It was interesting just walking through, looking at how many organizations didn't exist 5 years ago. So if anything, sort of the newness and the novelty. I've been surprised in just a year how much things like neuroscience and biometric feedback has taken off, because when we were doing it at Millward Brown, we were way out on the leading edge there, and I think people thought we were crazy. But I see it everywhere now. I see some areas that feel a little overcrowded to me. Social media monitoring, I think is a crowded field right now and hard to differentiate.
With not really a lot of really hard and practical solutions so far from what I can see.
Yeah, I mean, we're making great use of social listening to help us understand what the role IMAX is playing in a campaign. So, is the sentiment more positive when people talk about Transformers with IMAX? So it's very useful for us in discussing with the studios how to feature IMAX in their campaigns. But I also think I'm a relatively experienced user. So,
is it a strange feeling to go into an IMAX theater and just enjoy the movie as opposed to sitting there as the CMO?
Our movies are so immersive that even if you go in thinking about it as the CMO, your head doesn't stay there very long, because you just get pulled into the movie so much. So, I mean, I'm getting to see so many great movies, and I'm probably more on duty before and after when I'm thinking about, is the theater exactly the way I'd like it to be, and is the staff, and they're not our staff, they're partners. But in the movie, you can't really think about anything but the movie.
Yeah. One more thing about the technology here. One of the things that strikes me is that there is a good deal of technology that's looking for a research location or niche to fill, as opposed to we have a research technology. You agree?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of technology that is still in the category to me of cool idea. You help me figure out how to use it, and I think some of those will break through because a client will go, yeah.
But I've had people argue to me, that makes sense, because the research community will figure out how to use it, as opposed to the way I look at it. If you're going to come to a meeting like this that is for market researchers, and you're trying to sell your capability, come in with some concrete ideas about what you think you can do.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I do think that if you go back through the history of the research industry, most of the products in our business were invented between an agency and a client trying to solve a problem. And you go, wow, that's a good idea. I'll bet other people could use that. So I think we've got a long heritage of product development through experimentation. I agree that there are some ideas that you go, I don't get what that's ever going to be good for. But I do think there are some where a client's actually going to help the agency find their sweet spot.
What drew you to IMAX?
Well, they were a client of mine some almost 20 years ago. Rich Gelfond, who's the CEO, is an old friend, and I've always found the brand a really fascinating brand. So in some ways, we were mutually drawn back together on. I was going to be stepping down from my Millward Brown job, and Rich was looking for a CMO, and it was sort of like that peanut butter and chocolate commercial. It's like, oh my gosh, this is a perfect solution.
It was great to see Eileen again, and if you have somehow lost touch and would like to re-engage, you can email her at ecampbell@imax.com. That's your Research Business Daily Report, sponsored by 4i, the science of growth. This Friday, that's August the 22nd, 4i has set up a webinar. It'll be at 1 p.m. East, 12 p.m. Central, and it'll reveal results from a groundbreaking benchmarking study of the insights analytics functions within a number of CPG, pharma, and retail companies. I know it contains tremendous applicable learnings because I've seen some of them, which, among other things, will tell you how you can turn your insight and analytics team into a group of rock stars. Okay, assuming we've whetted your appetite to attend, we've also set up a link to get you registered there. If you are an RBDR subscriber, it's in today's email, so check that out. And if you're not a subscriber, you can scroll down to the content area that complements this video. We hope you have a great research day, and don't forget to be back and join us here tomorrow.